Welcome to the Struggle Series podcast with your host, Anthony Corelli.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Struggle Series podcast. I am your host, Anthony, and tonight we are going to touch on a topic that, frankly, I've been asked to touch on many times, and I don't know if I just shied away from it or if I simply just wasn't quite ready to present it, but it has never touched either of the podcasts in any detail until tonight. But before we get to tonight's episode, let me just remind you that if you are somebody who is struggling with spiritual warfare, demonic attack, we highly encourage you to continue to reach out and ask for help. You can reach us at the Struggle Series Podcast at gmail.com. We are more than happy to answer your questions, try to help you if we can, and even kind of maybe guide you to somebody in your area, somebody local who works in deliverance ministry, who's willing to hear your story. You know, a lot of times when you tell somebody you have some sort of paranormal activity or demonic manifestations happening in your life, a lot of people won't believe you. And if they do believe you, they want to shy away from the topic because maybe it scares them. And so one of the common pitfalls is that people just stop asking and kind of resign to the fact that this is their life now. And doing that is the beginning of the end. And so we always encourage you to reach out, regardless of how crazy the story sounds, because eventually you're going to meet somebody who does believe you. And so I say all that because tonight's story will be on a topic that many people disbelieve, or, you know, they just can't quite wrap their head around that this thing can happen. But there are people who have experienced it, and that's probably your best place to start. But what we don't want you to do is go down a rabbit hole where people believe you, but there's no help. And of course, if you're tuning into this podcast for the first time, we do not shy away from the fact that this podcast is based on Christian beliefs, on the Bible, Christian values, and who we believe is the cause of spiritual warfare, demonic attack, manifestations of any kind. So if you're tuning in, I would just humbly ask you, if that's not your belief system, give it a try. See what you think. Also want to remind you that this podcast, we try to release 2 episodes a month. It's not really a set schedule. We try to do it the second and fourth weeks of the month. However, you know, for example, when there's a month with 28 days, sometimes that throws off the next month, so on and so forth. But we do meet here on Thursdays at 6 p.m. And so the best thing to do is always subscribe to the channel, whether you're listening on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcast. And you can just get the notifications when a new episode pops up. It's probably the best way to do it. With all that being said, let's jump to tonight's episode, which is entitled Abduction. Have you ever taken the time to really consider the topic of alien abduction? Of course, most of us know what alien abduction is, but have you ever really considered the topic on a deep level? On a level where you have to truly put thought into the topic? Most of us would say that we know enough about the topic to know whether we believe it or not. Some of us have gone down the rabbit hole enough to know that some stories are simply made up, but others may be true. We may have watched a program or two and seen some evidence that made the concept of alien abduction possible, or maybe even probable. Testimony from police officers, government officials, etc., makes the topic much more believable. If you don't believe that alien abduction is real, why not? If you do believe in alien abduction, what are your beliefs on the topic? Are there truly other life forms out there somewhere in the universe? Are they demons? How did they get here? And why do they want to take us and bring us back? Or in some cases, take us and never bring us back. Lisa climbed into bed and contemplated the upcoming tasks for the following day. She was normally somebody who fell asleep quickly and did not wake up until her alarm went off. However, she had not slept well for the past 2 weeks. She had a nightmare that had disturbed her deep down in her soul. It seemed so real. Since that time, she was afraid to fall asleep. She found herself lying in bed, finding reasons to stay awake. On this night, the television was on, but she was in deep thought. She had an important presentation at work, and, if successful, she could be looking at a promotion and a raise. She was going over the presentation in her mind. She was rehearsing and committing the entire speech to memory. The memorization was actually an effective distraction, so much so that after about 20 minutes, she began to doze off. As she slept, she felt that fear welling up deep inside her. She became aware that there was a pending danger in the room. She thought to herself, "This is a dream. Just wake up and you'll be okay." Lisa had these dreams off and on her entire life. She remembered having these dreams as early as 7 years old. They were the most prevalent in her late teens. She had gone about 5 years without having these types of dreams. Now, at age 29, they seemed to be ramping up. Tonight, she seemed to be aware that the dream was coming. She was doing everything she could to wake up. She was confused. Her eyes were wide open. She could look around the room and she could see the YouTube video playing in the background on her television. She could even see the time on the screen of her laptop. This was new. In all the previous dreams, she didn't know it was a dream until after she woke up. This was the first time she knew it was coming before it came. What was the it? It was the being that came to her room and took her somewhere. She was not sure where somewhere was. She only knew that the being would take her somewhere, do unspeakable things to her, and then place her back in her bed. Then she would wake up from the dream with vague but terrifying memories of the acts that she had endured. As she tried to wake up, she saw a bright light appear under her closed bedroom door. It was far too bright to be the normal hallway light. Besides, she had turned off all the lights in the house before she went to bed. The light continued to get brighter and brighter. Soon, it had all but illuminated her entire bedroom. The fear she had cannot be described in words. It is the type of fear that can only come from knowing that not only is your life in danger, but your soul is in danger as well. She tried to scream, but the fear had taken all of her breath. She tried and tried to make a sound, but she could not. She thought, if I could just scream loud enough, my neighbor will come to check on me. Her efforts were futile. As she made one last attempt to call for help, the door of her bedroom slowly creaked open. The radiant light now completely blinded her. She tried to shield her face, but it was no use. The light was brighter than any man-made light source. Her fear was incapacitating. She somehow knew she was helpless. Her mind then began to wander. Why am I remembering this? I usually only remember bits and pieces after I wake up. Why is this so vivid? Wait, I not only remember, I know what is going to happen. That's when a fear greater than the one she had been feeling took over. She could no longer mentally handle what was about to happen. She began to pass out from the fear. When Lisa was 17 years old, she had gone to see a therapist about her dreams and her sleep deprivation. The therapist was an expert in sleep and dreams. The therapist had done a battery of tests and even a sleep study. Of course, during the sleep study, nothing occurred. It was the best sleep Lisa had in months. Still, The therapist had carefully listened to Lisa's scattered recollections of the dreams. She was able to describe some sort of torture that occurred in her sleep. The therapist, who was a Christian, had discerned that this may be, in fact, a spiritual problem and not a physiological one. She had mentioned that it may help to visit a clergy member or a priest for some spiritual guidance. Of course, the family mocked the therapist and pulled Lisa out of the therapy, claiming an ethics violation for trying to push religion instead of a traditional intervention. Fortunately, the dreams subsided and sporadically resurfaced from time to time. They had not been as bad as the ones in her late teens. As she passed out, she remembered the therapist's words. Lisa woke up in a room on what appeared to be some sort of surgical table. She immediately screamed, and this time, the sound came out. The scream was deafening. Then she heard a voice in her head. It said,
"Worry not, dear Lisa. Why do you scream? You've been here so many times before. Do we not always return you to your bed? Do we not always wipe your memory of such things? We have been harvesting you for many years. Fear not, it will all be over soon enough. Unfortunately, you are going to feel unimaginable pain."
The excruciating pain she felt in her stomach area was beyond any human comprehension. It wasn't just like her insides were being ripped out. This felt like it was on a molecular level. It was like she was being divided from herself. She screamed again. This time, the being became angry.
"Silence, Lisa. I grow tired of your complaining. You should be grateful. Do you realize that I could kill you any time I desire? You humans have no idea how powerful we are. Instead of being grateful that we chose you, you scream like an animal. We have chosen you because your eggs are perfect for our genetic modification. You stupid human. You don't realize that we are breeding an army of beings that will one day rule over eternity. We are using your eggs to create beings that are far superior to any human. You are the mother of these superior beings, yet you cry out in agony. Instead, you should rejoice that you've been chosen for such an honor. You have already mothered thousands of these beings. This extraction alone will yield dozens of viable embryos. The pain exists because the eggs must be extracted in a way that you cannot understand. So, shut up and revel in the knowledge that you are the mother of an army."
Then the being waved its hand over her face, and she fell into a deep sleep. However, she seemed to know that she was now sleeping. This meant one of two things. Either she was having a dream within a dream, or she was not dreaming about the abduction. She had actually been abducted. She began to panic. She felt so alone. She felt helpless. It became her reality that these were not dreams at all. She had been here before, countless times. She had endured this pain over and over most of her life. She considered that her memories had always been wiped, but somehow they had bled through from time to time. She had remembered bits and pieces and had even shared them with family, close friends, and even the therapist. That's right, the therapist. Lisa remembered the therapist. She remembered the therapist's suggestions for remedies. She remembered the hypnosis. She remembered the genuine concern on the therapist's face when she disclosed what she remembered after awaking from each hypnotic state. Then, like a lightning bolt, Lisa remembered the therapist recommending spiritual intervention. She remembered the suggestion to see a pastor or a priest. Why would the therapist want her to do that? Why not a monk or a shaman or an imam? Why a priest or a pastor? Was it because of Jesus? As soon as she thought the name of Jesus, she woke up on the surgical table. The pain she felt was unimaginable. She knew that she could not endure this much longer. She wished she hadn't woken up. She had realized why the being had put her to sleep. She wondered if she would die. She struggled to hang on to life. She wondered, is this what happens to people who disappear and are never seen again? Did they come here to this place or places like this? Do these beings just dispose of us somewhere in the vastness of space? Do they bury us deep in the earth? Where do they put the humans who die from these procedures? The pain snapped her out of her contemplation. She was sure she was dying. Then she remembered the therapist's words. She thought to herself, I need spiritual intervention. I need God to save me. She felt hopeless. She had not grown up with any religious teachings. How does somebody reach out to God? How do I pray? As her life began to fade from her being, she mustered up the strength to shout. She only had enough energy to shout one word. Jesus! Lisa sat straight up in her bed. It took a solid minute for her to catch her breath. She looked around the room. She was awake and alive. Just in case, she turned on the light and looked in the mirror. She even pinched herself. As she sat on the edge of the bed, her reality hit her. She knew without a doubt that she had been the victim of an alien abduction. She also knew that these aliens were not good beings. She wasn't sure if they were demons, avatars, fallen angels, or an elder race. She only knew that they were evil. She now knew their evil agenda. She now knew that countless people around the world had been telling the truth about abductions. She began to hyperventilate. So, there you go. That story is entitled Abduction. What do you think? You know, this topic has been kicked around so much for, I don't know, the early part of the 1900s all the way up to now. Stories like Betty and Barney Hill, different abduction stories, movies have been made. But the stories were always easily dismissed. And then, very recently, our own government came out and said, yeah, there's some things that we see in the skies and some things going on that are not from us, and we're not sure what they are. Now, most of us would say they probably know more than they're telling us, and that could be true. But I think that if we're honest, this topic has now become almost mainstream. I want you to think about this. Very recently in human history, the government came out and said, yes, UFOs are real. And most of us didn't even blink. In the 70s or 80s, if somebody would have revealed this to us, there probably would have been some sort of panic. And I believe, and not to be too conspiratorial, but I believe that they've kind of slowly conditioned us to the topic. And that's probably for a reason. Now, we can go down 5,000 rabbit holes today and debate for hours and hours on end because there's so many different groups of people that study this topic, way more than I do. And those people range from kind of atheistic non-believers in God who believe these are aliens, are basically beings from another planet, from another solar system somewhere, that have somehow found the ability to traverse large amounts of space in a very short period of time to get to us. There's other people that maybe have a more agnostic approach that say if there's a God, he's just created all kinds of different civilizations all over the universe. And as they evolve, they find ways to travel off of their planets and go far away to examine the solar systems, right? Well, I don't think we can kick that aside because starting in the late 1960s, we did the same thing. And we are now finding ways to continue to do that with people working real hard to try to get us to Mars with humans on the crafts and not just rovers and things like that. That's what we're doing, right? And so as we evolve, you can see that technology allows us the ability to do such things. And then, of course, maybe on the other side of the spectrum are Christians who believe that, yes, of course, there are other beings in the universe, and they are out there because they were given dominion over that realm of what the Bible would call the second heaven, which would be outer space, and that they come from there and come here to Earth for, whatever purposes that may be. And we have to be careful not to say that they're all evil, because as Christians, do we not believe that there's angels that come and intervene on our behalf? And so where do they come from? They come from the heavenly realm through the second heaven into our realm, the first heaven being our skies, and then to our planet. And so we kind of believe that as Christians, right? It's not like an unfathomable topic. So the real question becomes, what are these beings? If of course you believe they exist at all. And I think by now you really have to look at all of the evidence. So many people from different walks of life are claiming that they not only see aliens, but they have actually had some sort of encounter. I don't know if you remember, like me when you're old, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when you make contact, and I think fourth kind is when you've actually been abducted. And so these would be close encounters of the fourth kind, right? And there is like a mountain of evidence that is compiled by the MUFON organizations, where very credible people, military people, people with high-level clearances, top secret clearances, police officers, doctors, people that have credibility that are saying that these things have happened. And so I think at this point you have to say, well, it's at least a possibility. But if you believe in these things, then what are these beings? And I would encourage you, if the topic is important to you, to do your research. There's we can probably touch on some of them here. There's a group of people that would say they're all demons, and that they're simply demons that are, they come and mess with people, and whether they can take them off planet, or whether they change the environment that the person is in visually, or create an environment that where the person doesn't know where they are, and some sort of kind of demonic knowledge that we don't possess. And then there's people that would say that maybe these demons have created these type of avatars, like these little suits that would be like the gray aliens or the reptilians, and then the demons can inhabit them like a body, like they're always trying to possess us. So if they found a way to create some sort of like organic type of suit that can live and breathe, but then the spirit of that suit is actually the spirit of the demon. Sounds far-fetched, but there's a group of people that would say that. And, I'm not disputing any of these. I'm just putting them out there. And then maybe there's even on the far end of that, and we can go very much into the nuance of this, but not for today and not this time. But there's people that would also believe that there is an elder race of beings. And this is where it gets a little more complicated. And maybe, if I'm honest, a little more where I believe, not every detail of this, but kind of this camp, if you will, that in between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, some people would say, or even before Genesis 1, the universe had been created, and there were beings that kind of dwelled here, there, and everywhere in the universe, right? And then somehow, when there was a fall from Satan, where the Bible says that I saw Satan fall like a star from heaven, and this cosmic war occurred, this rebellion. And I kind of lean this way because the Bible alludes to something known as Rahab. And if you do your research, and I'm not going to go into detail here because I want you to do your own research, that Rahab may actually be the planet that existed between Mars and Jupiter, which is what we would call now the asteroid belt. So there seems to be some sort of kind of heavenly body that was there, some debris that exists there because maybe there was some sort of destruction of that heavenly body, but the debris stayed in orbit of the sun. And so now there is the debris left between that other planet. And this could have been part of that cosmic war. Now, again, you can imagine we can do 40 podcasts just on that subject. And there's so many people that you can listen to. Just a simple search, even on YouTube, you'd probably find several credible people that can at least give you kind of a thought out presentation of it. But if this is the case, this elder race of beings that was out there may exist, and they wouldn't be necessarily the good guys, because those would be the people that kind of chose the wrong side of the rebellion. And, I guess you could kind of even lean to the fact that maybe some of these entities that were the original fallen watchers of Genesis chapter 6 might be in chains in the earth physically, but their spirits can move around, and they're creating kind of ways to interact with us by being still kind of the rulers of regions. And then their legion of demons, which would be the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim that died in the flood story, then you would see how that kind of hierarchy works. Now, of course, if you talk to anybody that says they know for sure, of course they don't. But you can find several people that if you listened, you'd kind of believe that side. Then you listen to somebody else, and then you might believe the other side. But the purpose of me writing this story is to get you to think that we have to really ask ourselves, if people are being abducted and they're being experimented on, what is the purpose of that? And you can get very detailed and go down a huge rabbit hole here if you choose. But wouldn't it make sense that they are somehow experimenting with you, let's say sexually or even biologically extracting ways to reproduce out of your body with some sort of technology that we don't understand, to create a group of beings to continue what the Nephilim were originally intended to do, which was taint the bloodline? I always take you back to the book of Genesis, where God says that there will be a seed war. So Adam and Eve have fallen in the garden, and God comes to intervene, and Adam blames Eve. Eve blames the serpent. But what was the serpent trying to do? He was trying to get them distracted from God. And because God had saw what was done there, he declared a war, and he said, there will be enmity between her seed and your seed, speaking to the serpent, to the devil, to Satan. And so what did that mean? Well, that had to mean that there would be beings that were not of God's creation, but of the devil's creation. And that would be where these fallen angels came, procreated with women in some fashion, and gave birth to these giants that God had to wipe out in the flood because they were so evil. And the army that we can assume is being created that will fight with the Lord and the elect, the saved human beings, in the Battle of Armageddon at the end of the days, outlined in the book of Revelation, what is that army made of? And you can get deep and deep and deep into the book of Revelation and learn about these beings. You can also go to the book of Daniel, where for many, many years we thought that, the statue that listed all of the civilizations, that would occur, we always assumed that was maybe the Roman Empire, the last civilization, because what was the part of it where, the last civilization wouldn't mix with the clay? And do your homework, read on this. But could that be that that's because that was that hybrid Nephilim DNA that was out there? And I would also challenge you to believe that there is still Nephilim sex magic going on in the world right now. There are reports as I speak coming out now about a certain person's files and the things we're reading in those files, even though some of us had heard of this stuff before, are so disgusting and depraved that we can't even imagine that these things happen on Earth with these people. But when you start to realize that these people are into these societies, these cults that bring blood sacrifices and child sacrifices to demons to gain power, but to also create Nephilim bloodlines. If you look throughout history, so many different civilizations and their royalty has been so guarded about their bloodlines. Even Prince Charles bragging about that he's a descendant of Vlad the Impaler. And that's where we get the guy Dracula, the stories of Dracula, which means son of the dragon. And so they brag about having these bloodlines. Most people nowadays don't even really know their bloodlines. Maybe they've done some ancestry, but it's not as important to certain groups of people as it seems to be to these elites. And that is probably because the Nephilim bloodlines have kept them in a position of power. So if people truly are abducted, we need to pray for them, and we need to pray that they would turn to Jesus to break the bonds that these demons or these entities that are demonic have put on them. And if they have been through these experiments and modifications of their DNA, that they would be restored, because the Bible does say that he will make you a new creation. The old is gone, the new is come. And that's what we pray for these people. And I wrote into the story, the last part that I want to communicate. There are countless, and I mean countless, stories that you could search for where people feel that they are being abducted or have been abducted or in the process of being abducted, and they scream out the name of Jesus and it stops. That should tell you something. And it's not, don't take my word for it. If you are into this topic, research it, because the name of Jesus seems to stop what they're doing, which is indicative of the fact that these are demonic entities of some sort. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Struggle Series podcast. I want to remind you that this program is written, narrated, and produced by me, Anthony Corelli. This program is copyright The Struggle, LLC. Shout out to Todd Kazinka with Todd K Voiceovers for the music and the voiceover work. We appreciate you very much. Again, if you want to reach out to us, you could find us at the Struggle Series podcast at gmail.com, or you can always go to thestruggleseries.com to find out all about our organization. I want to thank you so much for tuning in once again. May God bless you and bring you peace.
Thank you for listening to the Struggle Series podcast. Please like, subscribe, and tell a friend. We will see you next time.